To understand microservices, we first must understand monolithic architecture. Let's use an illustration and analogy to visualize. Picture a single large college building that hosts everything, aka all the courses a student could want, meaning the college campus signpost might look something like this. And this would all refer to the same one building, aka a monolithic college building architecture. This is an important concept to understand because if we relate this to the technical CISSP exam, a monolithic software architecture would look something like this, where all the software related elements from the business to the code logic and even the database would all be in one unified code unit because monolithic means one, aka one unified unit, or one college building in the analogy. Monolithic architecture obviously comes with some pros and some cons, the biggest pro being it's easy to manage and develop in one big source code package. However, the major con is as the app or the building in the analogy grows, making changes can become a challenge. One small update might require rebuilding or deploying the entire system, aka relocating students to another campus. And that's not even considering if we wanted to expand or scale the operation, which would require multiple buildings, but the downside would be the single point of failure of the one building in the meantime. So, what would be an adequate solution to this monolithic architecture problem? Well, that's where the concept of microservices starts. You see, we could split that original building and build them into 4 separate units rather than one monolithic building in the first place. This would also mean we don't need one massive signpost anymore, but instead we need smaller signposts for each of the designated buildings and the courses that they may or may not host. So, in the CISSP technical realm, we could think of each of these buildings as micro buildings. And each of these micro buildings do a specific course, and those courses combined make the entire college campus. Now, as a nice bridge of how this analogy would relate technically to the CISSP exam, imagine each of those courses designated by the signpost are little microservices that go into each micro building. Which building and the order is totally discretionary by the college heads, but is easy to implement, and that signpost would bring the entire course that it referenced to that building. In other words, that is a microservices college building architecture. But to apply this to microservices software architecture in the real-life CISSP exam, imagine each software component as one of those signposts which brings a designated service, packaged as a microservice that can be used at a whim by any application that requires it. The main benefit of microservices is obviously flexibility and scalability compared to the monolithic architecture described earlier. And this eliminates a single point of failure and can be applied in many different ways, as explained on the screen analogies. CISSP exam tip. It is important to evaluate and understand the vulnerabilities in a system architecture, especially when integrating services such as microservices. Microservices may also be used through the use of APIs, application programming interfaces. For example, each microservice in the example here may have a specific API to do some logical service. These APIs can be called by the application when needed. Now we have an understanding of microservices and their benefits. Let's deep dive into the technicalities of how this works in the cloud and the virtualization realm. So let's start with some important CISSP technical terms, such as Software Defined Everything, SDX, which basically means that anything such as hardware and networking and even obviously software can be virtualized and managed as code. You may also hear the term Anything-as-a-Service, XaaS, which effectively means the same thing. This will be explained shortly through the use of an illustration and further analogies, but ultimately aid for the rapid expansion, scalability, high availability, and much more. Now let's deep dive into Anything as a Service, which will be a core concept to understand in the CISSP exam, and future cloud exams such as the CCSP and CCSK. Now, picture those microservices in the college, those little signposts, each relating to a specific service, aka a college course. I have put these in the clouds above. So take me to the clouds above. There are many derivatives of anything as a service, of which we shall look at Infrastructure as Code, IaC. Now let's expand the analogy and assume the college has been offered a grant to do more excellent law courses. This also means the college has some funds to build a new specialised building, state-of-the-art, 5 stars, for these new law courses. Now, in the traditional model, the college would need to call and pay some builders to do manual labour to build the new campus building or to extend the current. This is obviously very manual, hands-on, time-consuming, costly, admin hassle, etc., etc. Old school way of working, if you like. Whereas the more modern, new day way of working is infrastructure as code, which means we don't need to do this traditional model. Instead, we can just use that law microservice and build instantly the law building of our dreams. Oh yeah! So how does this work? Well, if you think about anything as a service, this extends beyond just servers and networking. Software-defined everything, for example, refers to a trend of replacing hardware with software using virtualization. What's more, this virtualization extends to virtualized software, virtualized networking, containerization, serverless architecture, infrastructure as code, SDN, software-defined network, vSAN, software-defined storage, etc., etc. In other words, anything as a service means literally anything is possible, from a simple click of the Go button. It's been pressed, now watch this. Boom, 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 boom. Look how easy it was to create those beautiful law buildings, all from the Go button. I guess anything as a service was not just some silly marketing term. As we now have our law buildings created, let's apply some of the law microservices into the buildings so we can pick and choose, or use all of them, or some of them, or none of them. What's even cooler with the infrastructure as a code and even software defined everything is literally everything is software defined, including networking, SDN, software defined networking, where we can choose what components we want to add into our new fancy law building. This could literally be any networking component, such as a fancy switch, cable, firewall, or even high speed internet of any type, because anything is possible with anything as a service. Some final CISSP exam tips. The term immutable architecture is one to remember, where a concept that a server should never change once it's deployed. It should only be cloned or rebuilt. And there are some examples of infrastructure as code management software, such as AWS CloudFormation, Terraform, and also Puppet. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you would like to see more content like this, it would be super fantastic if you could leave a like and subscribe to help support this channel's growth.